Throughout the syndication of Comedy Central's South Park, series creators Matt Stone and Trey Parker have never shied away from declaring what they believe makes a good television series. And many times the two have expressed a belief, both in the show itself and in DVD commentaries, that story is everything. The jokes made and lines spoken by the characters should service the story being told and be relevant to the plot at hand. Of course, the most famous example of this is the 2006 episode Cartoon Wars, where they lampoon the Family Guy writers, imagining them as mindless manatees that exist only to put random words and phrases into a generator to create irrelevant throwaway gags. While that is the most well-known example, it certainly isn't the only one, and although South Park started out as a show known for being thoroughly brutal to celebrities, Stone and Parker are keen to call out good plot structure even if it's been done by those formerly mocked in the series. Season 8's The Passion of the Jew satirizes Mel Gibson's troubling actions and disgraceful history by making him out to be a sadistic, sex-crazed maniac. It's one of the most notorious celebrity portrayals in the show's entire run. But remember that it certainly wasn't Michael Bay that saved us all from Man Bear Pig. Or what about Ben Affleck, paraded as an ass-faced boy from Season 5 or a clueless suitor of Jennifer Lopez in Season 7? He may have once been a prime target for the duo's ribbing, but he did direct Argo, and...
Alright, fine. Argo is a good movie.
Parker and Stone seem willing to give credit where it's due because they take the art of devising a story and coherent plotting so seriously. Which is why the episode of South Park I'll be speaking about today is so unique in my opinion, because it's one that does away with narrative altogether. This is the first and only time they've done that. Of course there have been times where they strayed from the show's traditional aesthetic design or the audience's expectations. Season 4's Pip and Season 2's Not Without My Anus, while being some of the series' most low-rated entries, are the ones that took that swing and tried to do something different, but there was a plot in those two. The 15th episode of Season 3, Mr. Hankey's Christmas Classics, has no story whatsoever. In my mind, this makes it one of the most unique episodes of the show. It actually feels more like South Park's twisted Yuletide version of TRL, a music video series very popular during South Park's run. There is no A or B story, it just features characters we love performing songs. And for the most part, it's uncommonly charming. I say uncommonly because charming isn't a word that is really used for a show like South Park, unless you're counting the unsophisticated and crude quality of the earlier season's animation. There was certainly an adorable type of charm to that. On November 23, 1999, an album called Mr. Hankey's Christmas Classics was released by Columbia Records. It's a really fun listen. The original songs were written by Trey Parker, and they are as showy and catchy as we'd expect from someone who had just had an Oscar-nominated song unfortunately lose to Phil Collins 8 months earlier before the album's release. There are tunes on this record that I get stuck in my head in like July, so take that as you will. Surprisingly, the album didn't do great at release. It only charted to number 33 on Billboard's Christmas chart. It was beaten by Kenny G at number 1, Rosie O'Donnell at number 3, and Celine Dion at number 4. Take that as you will. Considering South Park was one of the most notorious shows at the time, and this was released during the beginning of the holiday season, you'd think it'd be a massive success. During the DVD mini commentary for the episode, Parker chalks it up to the fact that an actual piece of human excrement dressed as Mr. Hankey was on the cover of the record. In his opinion, people didn't buy it because they just didn't know South Park affiliated. I'm not so sure this is the case, since Mr. Hankey was almost as well known as Cartman himself at this point in pop culture. So I think people would have recognized Mr. Hankey, and South Park fans would have surely recognized him. Let's just say it's not the most forgettable character design. And of course, there's clearly the South Park printed on the spine of the CD in large font. I think this might have been Parker's bruised ego making excuses, but that's okay. His bruised ego has contributed to a lot of great gags on the series. A week later, on December 1st, the episode itself would premiere. There are similarities between the track list of the album and the musical numbers performed in the episode, but also some distinct differences. The songs that carry over from the album are Mr. Hankey the Christmas Pooh, of course, Dreidel Dreidel Dreidel, O Tannenbaum, Christmas Time in Hell, Carol of the Bells, O Holy Night, Merry Fuck Christmas, I Saw Three Ships, and Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. Something that I found very amusing about this episode is the way the characters perform these songs as if they know there's an audience watching. That was done in a similar fashion in Season 12's Elementary School Musical, but it wasn't consistent in that one the way it is here. As I talked about earlier, there was a plot that needed to be taken care of, and this episode's lack of a narrative-driven structure allows for consistency in the way the characters behave that makes it feel like a play and not an episode of television. It really seems like they're singing and dancing to the viewers at home. The highlights of the episode are excellent. I think the song that carries over from the album the best is Merry Christmas by Mr. Garrison, or Miss Garrison, or President Garrison, or
Whatever Garrison wants to call himself since the sex change operation.
It's my favorite one. I love how the song ramps up and he gets more and more excited to the point of screaming at these poor Indian and Japanese people. It's a proper representation of what this character used to be known for in the earlier seasons. I also love Oh Holy Night, where Cartman and a group of very strange-looking heavenly beings perform to Jesus in the manger. Cartman does this high-pitched squealing during the end that makes me giggle every time. This is a case of where I think the added animation really accompanies the original audio well. Dreidel, Dreidel, Dreidel gives the chosen people their time to shine. The Bravlovskys teach us about Hanukkah while ignoring the taunts of the little fat Goyim mocking their culture. I've always had a soft spot for the Bravlovskys and am happy to see whenever they're the focus of an episode. This is also just a great rendition of this traditional Jewish song. The arrangement's by Mark Scheinman, who previously worked with Matt and Trey on the South Park movie, is absolute fire. This is one of those that will occasionally be playing in my head when I'm preparing for Easter Sunday in April. There doesn't have to be snow on the ground for these songs to get wrapped in your brain. There are a few videos here that are fairly short and don't really need to be mentioned, or there isn't much to say about them. Carol the Bells by Mr. Mackey is funny. I guess O Tannenbaum would be my least favorite in the episode if it went on longer, but it's mainly just an interlude that leads up to the next song I'm going to mention. Christmas Time in Hell is my runner-up for best in the episode, as well as my second favorite on the record. It's an upbeat ditty about how the wretched spawn and residents of the nether regions spend the holiday season. Satan used to be a fairly frequent character in the show, despite him being absent in current episodes. He was arguably the most important part of South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, which was in theaters just 6 months before this episode aired. This is one of the music video segments I was disappointed with when compared to the album. I actually think it works better as an audio track. I don't know if there was really anything interesting they could do with it visually, from a stylistic standpoint. Presenting the things that happen in this song's lyrics isn't as funny as in Merry Christmas, because the references in Christmas Time in Hell are so specific and already describe what actions are happening. With Merry Christmas, there are many different ways they could possibly portray the races and countries Garrison mentions. And also, a good part of the South Park movie took place in Hell, so it was fresh on fans' minds and it was pretty easy to imagine how everything would be presented. Parker and Stone lampoon each celebrity in the traditional South Park way, with the real-life faces being plastered onto the animated bodies. That's another long-gone tradition from the older days of the show that isn't seen anymore. I love to have them do that recently as sort of like a nostalgic throwback for the fans, but, whatever. So if Christmas Time in Hell is just okay, I think the big stinker of the episode is the duet between Santa and Jesus. It starts out kind of endearing but gets dragged on far too long. According to the DVD commentary, this is one they wanted to include on the album, but they couldn't get the rights to Duran Duran's Rio. They were able to clear it in time for the episode itself, of course. In this one fan's opinion, I think the record is better off for it. Another one that I'm not a huge fan of is the I Saw 3 Ships segment. I was never appreciative of Shelley until later on in the series, where they actually started to give her character arcs and not just have her be a screaming monster. It took a long time for them to give her any sort of resemblance of a personality, but unfortunately, this song is really all screaming, and I never found the Shelley and Stan dynamic of the earlier years that funny. One absolute glaring omission from the episode is Swiss Colony Beef Log, which is my favorite song off the record and unfortunately didn't make the cut. I'm not sure why. It's peak Cartman, particularly peak 90s Cartman, when his entire persona was just being a mean little fat boy with a big mouth and a propensity for gluttony. He hadn't yet evolved into his evil, manipulative, genius persona that's willing to feed a kid his own parents. I believe this song would have lent itself well to animation and produced far more laughs than I Saw 3 Ships or the Santa and Jesus duet. Maybe the Coastal Elite suits at Comedy Central had a bias against Midwestern meat-based delicacies? Maybe they're being kind and don't want to encourage us to spend $29.99 plus shipping on a 2-pound meat circle? Whatever the reason, it's a letdown that this song couldn't have been included. The episode ends with a rendition of Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas, performed by all the characters who had been in the previous songs. I'm someone who's been watching this show for a long time, and there is something about seeing all these characters I love in one location singing this song together that is weirdly heartwarming. Call me a Nancy boy all you want, but Mr. Hankey's Christmas classics really activates my nostalgia, and this moment puts it on high speed. It ends with them flushing Mr. Hankey down the toilet and back into the sewer, with the promise of seeing him next year. Even though I speak positively of it, I can also understand why many fans would skip this one during a rewatch. It's admittedly not as funny as the other holiday outings like Woodland Critter Christmas or my personal favorite, Christmas in Canada, but I think it should be respected for attempting to do something wildly different. Trey Parker has said in the past that he wishes he could do away with the earlier seasons of the show, just remove them. But I think that doing that would also remove some truly creative moments where they were still willing to play around with the formula and spice things up a bit. As naive as this may come across, there was actually a time when South Park was shocking and kind of dangerous in the way it presented things. And I don't think Parker and Stone would be willing to do an episode like this or Not Without My Anus anymore. In present South Park, the spark is sporadically there, like with the pandemic specials where they introduce the four boys as their grown-up counterparts, but I think that sort of experimentation has taken the back seat as Parker and Stone get older. But that will happen as you write Broadway musicals and direct movies with K-Dot. Rewatching this episode for me was a nostalgic look back at a bygone era of these two creators. People's creativity ebbs and flows over time, and hopefully we'll get to see a big swing like Mr. Hankey's Christmas classics again from these two. Maybe with this upcoming fifth feature set to debut in July, we'll get something like that again. The inspiration always seems to come back when they switch mediums, whether it be a Broadway musical, or a live-action television series, or a video game. But for now, this episode is a reminder of a time when you really didn't know what South Park would present to you each week. I haven't written any kind of essay in over a decade. I have no idea why I made this Christmas-themed video in March. Thank you for watching.
Goodbye!